that should work. Welcome, everybody. I'm Ingy.net, and I'm going to give a talk today about this thing called Staccato. Okay, I'm going to actually go one size smaller. All right, who's heard of active state in the room? That's cool. So everybody knows active state from back in the day. They put Perl on Windows, and we're really quite famous for that back in the end of the 90s. So Staccato, the thing I'm going to show you today, is active state's latest product. And I've been working with active state since last YAPC, actually. I ran into the man. Raise your hand, Jan. That man in the middle right there. Jan's been with active state since the 90s, one of the oldest active state employees. Well, he is actually one of the oldest and one of the longest employed by active state. He's older than me, which means he's quite barely, but it's true. So basically what active state does is take open source stuff, make it closed source, improve it for the enterprise, and then they basically sell support on that. And their main products have been Active Perl, Active Python, Active Tickle, which you would think, why not Active Ruby? But it just worked out that way. We happen to have two of the top Tickle developers in the world working at active state. And a lot of companies actually pay good money to use Tickle, so that's why that makes sense. And then they made this Komodo IDE, which was built over the Mozilla framework. It's probably the biggest thing to be built over that. So anyway, active state did this for the last 10 years and decided maybe it's time to make something new. So last year they started making Staccato, which is their part of cloud computing, and that's what I'll talk about today. They started it last year, and it actually went to a 1.0 release at the end of February this year. So who knows what, well, you can read what POS is, but who really uses the word POS in daily speech? Nobody, right? Well, I'll put my hand down. Put your hand down. So POS means platform as a service, and I do suspect that it'll become a pretty common term in the next couple years. It's kind of the future of web development and application deployment and development, and I'm here to show you the future. So I think of POS as the next big abstraction in computing. So who in here has done any kind of web development with Perl? I assume most people have. That's kind of what we get paid to do these days. So that part's the fun part. The shitty part is setting up a server, getting your web servers configured, getting your databases set up, and that kind of thing. It's been done so many times that somebody is going to create a clean abstraction that just works, and we won't think of computing at that layer anymore. We'll just say, there's this thing, here's my app, make it work. And that's what Staccato tries to be, one of those things, and that's called POS. So there's another OS besides, we decided that Gisela OS was actually GAAS, which is, if anybody knows Gisela, he's the one that wrote LWP and all that stuff. He actually works for active state as well, but he lives in Norway, and he's been working there almost as long as Jan, not quite. But anyway, IaaS is infrastructure as a service, and people might not use that word, but they probably have heard of Amazon EC2 and the others like that, where you can just spin up VMs. Now, those VMs are bare, so it's almost like POS sits on top of IaaS. Who's heard of Heroku in the audience? And who's heard of .cloud? A lot of people have heard of .cloud because Miyagawa worked there last year, and he gave some talks on it. And so these are two examples of platform as a service. And the basic deal is you have your app, you say push app to service, and it's running. And that's all it is. So those two would be defined as public POS, meaning, push your app to where we say to push it, and we'll take care of all of the rest. Staccato is private POS, saying you can have all of Heroku on your own laptop or in your own, basically you host it where you want to. And we think, or I'd say ActiveState thinks, that private POS is going to be really important because, well, I'll talk about that in a second. So let me give you a quick demo so we're not just bullshitting. Let's see this thing running. So let me grab this URL. This is live demo time. I love live demos. They're painful, but they sometimes work. All right. So I'm going to blow that up a little. I love this network. This is the best conference network I've ever had, period. It's awesome. How many people would agree with that? Frickin' awesome. All right. Okay, so there's a command line program called Staccato, and you can say Staccato help, and it tells you all the things it can do with it. I am going to Staccato. I'm going to see what my Staccato target is, and it's what I want it to be. It's this thing called Staccato, which is the vanity domain that ActiveState bought for their public sandbox that you can get an account on, and you can just come up to me and I'll give you an account. So it's targeted at the right place, so that means I can log in. So I would say, and I've shortened this to S because I can't type very well, so I say S. It's alias to S. S login, Ingy at activestate.com. Password. It's password. No, it's not. It's even dumber than that. I won't tell you what it is. Okay, so now I'm logged into there. If I say sinfo, I can see some basic info about the VM, and it shows that I'm logged in here. And I can see if I'm running any apps. Okay, now I'm running this app. Staccato supports groups, so I'm going to actually set my default group to, well, no, I'm going to just leave it. I'll show you that stuff later. So what I really want to do is take this multi-sweeper thing. We don't even know what this is, so let's look at it. It's a JSON, I'm sorry, I think it's a Node.js application. There's a little YAML file. I love that they use YAML. You guys probably know that I'm the author of YAML PM and stuff like that, and I love that it had nothing to do with me, but they use it. It's great. Yeah, it's here. You can see that it's a Node app, and so we're just going to push this, and it'll ask us a few questions, or we can add the -n flag. But the first time I'll just push it. Okay, yes, I would, and it's probably going to tell me. Okay. So the name multi-sweeper has already been reserved. So let's push. We'll give it a new name, Lxe multi-sweeper, because this basically is going to create a domain name that this is a web app that we're creating, and at the end of this, Lxe-multisweeper.staccato is going to be the URL of this web app. So. Okay. Yes, I would. That's my URL. Oh, sorry. So this uses Redis. So it created a Redis instance that it can use. I don't really even use Redis. What is Redis? Something. Yeah, it's some kind of databasey thing. So Staccato just abstracts all that. It abstracts MySQL, Postgres, Redis. What is the others? Does it? What? Yeah, next version. Yes, Memcache. The next version. So, and now this thing is running. If I say sapps, this guy is running, and it looks like it usually gives you a little address where I was running. Oh, here we go. I hate when it. All right, give me a second. actually. Okay. So it's this little game that's actually, you play the game, you say, what's your name? I'm Ingy. And it's a multiplayer Minesweeper. You remember the Windows program from the 90s? So I start this game. Everybody remembers this stuff, right? I'm not very good at it. Anyway. So if you guys went to that URL, which you could, yapsy-multisweeper. Oh, yeah, cool. I love you guys. Bam. Let's play. Boom. All right. So you guys can play that, and you don't have to listen to the rest of my talk. I understand. That's fine. Okay. All right. So we deployed an app, and we talked about it a little bit, but it was basically just a one-command push a GitHub directory, and bam, it's working. Okay. So I'm going to step away from the code for a second and say why I think, and this is mostly my opinion slide, but why private paths matters. And so I think it's that cloud computing is taking the internet in the way of corporate interests and centralizing things, centralizing data in such a way. The internet was designed, in my opinion, and the opinion of others that I've learned from, to be a decentralized medium where you have a peer-to-peer, and if you drop an atom bomb on this continent, this continent's doing fine. So it just reroutes everything, right? So it's all good. Anyway, there's many reasons why the centralization of the internet is bad. Moral reasons, all kinds of reasons. So the cloud is this idea that just push everything out to the cloud and we'll take care of everything. But I think that the cloud is ease of use. That's good. And giving up control, that could be good or bad. If it's a simple thing and you just want to say, just run it. I don't care where you run it. That's fine. It's just saying, I can't actually let you have that data. My government doesn't allow that. My company doesn't allow that. Then you're kind of screwed, and you just kind of got to not use cloud computing. But they can be separate. And so Jan gave a little talk about Staccato last year when it was just a little infant baby, and a lightning talk, actually. And I went to go, because I had worked at ActiveState 10 years ago. I went to make fun of him for that. And then when he showed me what he was really doing, I was like, wow, I want to work on that. And he's like, well, Jeff, our boss, offered you a job a couple months ago, and I thought he was just saying hi. So by the end of the day, I was working at ActiveState again. And so I like to think of Staccato as the anti-cloud. Now, that's just my opinion. But I think it in the best terms possible, that it's really it's taking the things that you want out of the cloud without tying you into the things that you don't want. Okay, so I'm going to give just an overview of the basic highlights of Staccato, and I'll try to go through this pretty quick. Okay. It's agnostic in that it runs on just about any hypervisor that's popular these days. And these are actually the ones that are big cluster farms. So it runs as a big cluster, but it'll also run on any of your laptops as a VM. Any of your laptops which can run VMware, which is probably everyone in the room, or VirtualBox, you can spin up Staccato. It's scalable in that it can go from laptop to enterprise. You can actually start on your laptop and move it off to EC2 with export the VM and import it wherever else you want to run it. So that's good. It's Acmeist, which is my kind of passion of multi-language. People would say polyglot. It supports these 8 languages out of the box, and now it has, borrowing from Heroku's idea, language build pack. So we could make a build pack for Perl 6 and use this to push Perl 6 apps that just run instantly. Well, Patrick actually told me that Perl 6 is fast now, for some definition of fast. So it's built around an open core, and that open core currently is, who's heard of VMware's Cloud Foundry? Anybody? It's a lot of people haven't heard of it, but because VMware is mostly in the idea, or in the game of making things that run virtual machines, but they actually have this POS I would call it Staccato Lite, because you really couldn't use it for anything serious because it has a lot of security flaws. But this is what ActiveState started with and improved it until it was ready for the enterprise, which is kind of what they do with other things. I think Perl was in a lot better starting position, but they did harden it for the enterprise. it has most of the features that you would expect in Heroku and more. We added, I think we're the first one to do this, add user groups, and such that, like, I can make a group of everyone in this room, and we all own the apps. So it's a multi-tenant system in that, like, I can create individual accounts for all of you. I can set limits on what you can do. And this is less important for you as an individual running it, but when you take this to work, you have an IT department who wants to control this, but then spin up accounts for everyone in dev, and that's kind of the market that we're targeting this at. So admins, users, and groups, when you take it to work, translates to IT dev department and teams within the dev department. It's secure in that every instance of every app runs in its own VM, as it were, its own container. Who's heard of Lxe? They're starting to become more popular. Lxe just stands for Linux Containers. It's part of the kernel, and it allows you to spin up thousands of lightweight containers that look and feel like their own machine to an app running in it, but don't have access to the rest of the system and can't break out. Lxe is awesome. This allows it to be controllable, set hard limits on memory usage, disk usage. The VM cluster, or the VM itself, is API controlled through a REST API. And we have currently 2 or 3 clients. If you count Komodo, I think Komodo has some integration. But the main client is the terminal client that I showed you, and then we have a web client that I'm going to show you in a second. It's very real world in that it gives you all of the keys to just log in. It's like a VM, but it doesn't hide anything from you. It doesn't say, oh, you can't log in as root. You definitely can. You can do anything you want. You probably wouldn't want to mess around too much, because then it's not going to be Staccato anymore. But if you have some problem and you know how to fix it, and it's obviously related to Nginx and it's a bug in Staccato, you can just go in and do it. Basically, we're just licensing the software. ActiveState is just licensing the software. And it's in the world. It's released. But what is it exactly? How is it shipped to you in the box? It's Staccato is actually just a binary blob that's 1.2 gigabytes. It's a VM that you spin up with VMware or something like that. It contains an operating system, some web servers, a bunch of languages, things that we call services, which are just databases, but they could be any kind of service that that apps would want to have access to. And so in a cluster environment, you would actually spin up the same blob, say, 20 times if you wanted to have a 20-node cluster. And then you would tell each blob, you're going to be this part, and you're going to be this part, and you're going to be this part. And then they just all work together as a cluster. So it's kind of a pretty elegant design that way. Like I said, Staccato was started a year ago. They started thinking about it in April, kind of serendipitously. VMware released this Cloud Foundry, and they're like, that's a good starting point. Let's go with that. Within a couple of weeks, I believe, is that right, Jan, that you added Perl and Python support? And we offered it back to VMware, and they're like, well, we'll take Python, but we don't want Perl. So, fuck them. But, and Duke Leto actually went to work for them for a while and tried to bring in Perl support, but they're kind of VMware's a little bit of a slow-moving company, in my opinion. This was cool. They acquired a cloud company that was actually started by a 15-year-old in Seattle in between his high school classes, created a cloud company that was basically a POS for Perl, specifically for Perl. And basically, this kid was brilliant, and we bought his company so that we could actually employ him and put him to work, and he's done a lot of the core work on Staccato. He's actually a CPAN author. The guy who wrote Soap Light, it's his son. Daniel Kolchenko is his name. He's got a bright future. I joined the next month when I ran into Jan here, and at the end of February this year, we released it, and now it's, I like to describe it as Cloud Foundry is like a go-kart. You can drive around, and actually Staccato is a car ready to sell off a lot. So ActiveState's been so far been very regular about their releases. I mean, I can't say release dates or anything but if you look through the release dates, it's about every 2 months that they've been putting out new releases. So, so here's a little ASCII-O. Who's used ASCII-O in the audience? It's the best CPAN module. It's like a GUI visual thing that you can just draw boxes and arrows, and then it's just like Visio, but in a little ASCII thing, and then it saves as an ASCII file, and then you throw it in your slides or whatever, like I did here. So this big box here is either the cluster or the single. It's the Staccato, and then these are the client, like that little terminal program I was showing you, and then this is over here was the browser that we actually saw the running app in. So internally, Staccato consists of these different VMs. You can think of them as each one of these can be a separate VM because they're conceptually separate pieces. So you can say, or they can, if I was just going to run it on my laptop, it would be one VM playing all of the roles. So the concept of the roles in the VMs is neatly abstracted. These DEA things it's VMware made-up term called Droplet Execution Agent, which really means just a worker node. That's where the programs actually run. I forgot to add services. So services run on their own VMs, like the MySQL server and the Postgres server, that kind of thing. They can. And the health manager speaks over this bus and kind of makes sure that everything is staying in tune. And if something dies, spins up a new instance, so you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. The cloud controller is the main unit that the clients talk to, and it's for controlling all the different parts of the VM. Does anybody have any questions on this at this point? I'd like to.
So there are multiple VMs.
There are multiple. So these are roles. These little boxes are roles, and they can be, like for instance, the health manager could be part of this one VM that's running on my laptop. Like all of these roles are in one VM. Or I can set it up in a cluster where the health manager gets its own VM, or maybe it shares it with the cloud controller, but then I put all my DEAs. The common way to do this is actually spin up one VM. And I forgot to repeat the question. I'm sorry. So the question are all these boxes VMs? I think it was. I forget.
There are multiple VMs on this.
Right. You can have multiple VMs or one VM playing these different roles. And the way that most people do it in a cluster thing is to set up multiple DEAs, because that's where you really want to be sharing your work across all your users. Any other questions before I keep going? Okie doke. So, which leads me to the microcloud. So, ActiveState now has this licensing model such that if you use this running on your laptop, it's free of charge forever. So if you want to use Staccato for, I think currently it's single VM and non-commercial use or internal commercial use. So if you want to use it at work, but it doesn't actually face the outside. That's where it currently is. And which is pretty cool. It would be, some might say it would be cooler to be open source, and maybe it will, who knows. But currently it's not. But, if you think about, and I'm apologizing a little, and I don't know if I should, but, if you think of, it's an open source conference, and I'm very open source. So it's like ActivePerl, licensing-wise. You get to use it for free, but we offer support contracts, that kind of thing. So, I was going to spin up in fact, I will. I'm going to spin up a microcloud. I forgot to do this. But I'm going to take VMware VM Player, and hopefully I already have one that I spun up before. This one looks suspect. Okay. So I'm spinning up a Staccato VM, and in a second we'll be able to see some neat stuff with that. Actually, I think it's just restoring, so it should only take a few seconds. The most important thing I really want to show you on this is the front page of the actual console after it boots. So it gives you a URL, and it's called pairup.local. And since we're on the same network, if you guys were to go to pairup.local in a browser, you would probably come up with some web console page. So, in fact, before I show you that web console, let me show you. So I wrote a one-liner, and if you search for Staccato one-liner, if you Google for it, you don't have to remember this now, but basically you can curl this script and pipe it into Bash if you trust Ingy, which you never should, by the way. You should read it first and then run it. And it will go and get a copy of VirtualBox if you don't have it. It'll get Staccato if you don't have it. It will configure everything for you and have you running into the state that looks like this when you're done, of something running. And now you have a Staccato that's working. Don't run it here because it would really, doing a bunch of 1.2 gigabyte downloads would probably make the network unhappy. I don't know. This is a pretty good network, but I have some copies. That I can give you a copy in a couple of minutes if you find me in the hallway, or come to Jan and I's Staccato workshop, and we have a 2-hour workshop where we're actually going to do some really cool stuff with this, and we'll get you set up there. Interestingly, this getstaccato.com, Staccato.com is a Staccato instance that happens to be running an application called Get that Jan wrote that actually just serves up some static files that we need, like this microcloud script. So that's pretty cool. Okay, now I want to show you the Staccato management console. So, like I said, the VM, the cloud controller, speaks a REST API. And if you spin up a new VM, you would, since you were the first person hitting that screen and it knows it, it would allow you to create an account. And the password that you type in would not only be your Staccato account, but the password of the Staccato user, such that as an admin, you could actually log SSH into the box and become root and do root stuff with the VM. I'm not actually an admin of this machine, but I'm not a VM level admin, but I have a Staccato level admin account. And I can do something neat here now. What was it? Okay. Now, just kind of squint your eyes so you don't see. Well, so we have an overview. And this is a cluster, actually. When I bring up the one for, what was it, pairup.local, let's open. So, Well, I'm not going to try to figure that out quite yet. So this VM that it's speaking to is playing these 5 roles, and the other roles are off on different VMs altogether. In this version of Staccato, you don't see all of the separate VMs in a cluster. In the next version, you will. So here are a bunch of users, and there's about, I shouldn't show you these users, so I won't. But it's a list of, because it would be a violation of privacy or something like that. But because this is our actual sandbox. But I can show you the groups. So there's an active state group and a pair-up group, and I'm going to talk a little bit about pair-up in a second. That's my thing. So I find people and I pair program with them, and these are some of the people. Like you can see, if we show all the pair-up. Oh yeah, sorry, my eyes are getting way bad. So you can see some of the people. There's Miyagawa and Brock and stuff, and another some guys I've paired with recently. So I'll show you some other neat things. One of the things you can't do in the terminal client is get graphs of the performance of your VM, which can be really useful. This is basically the top, running top, and showing the load average of the machine over the last hour. So some interesting graphs. All of this is actually, this whole client is a JavaScript app, pure JavaScript. Those graphs are rendered by JavaScript, and they just make calls to the REST API, get back a bunch of number points, and piece it out. I'm going to show the App Store in a second. So let's go back to the slides. Is there any questions about that console? Okay. One thing I do want to show you is, if we're back here, when I said, let's just say S apps, if I put a -T flag on the end of this, it will show all of the HTTP traffic that happened for that. So you can actually see where all this information is coming from, and it's pretty neat. So if you want to write your own clients to Staccato, you can actually follow what the logic is to do the various operations that this does. That was helpful. I was with the architect of the web console that I showed you, and I had to go through these dumps a lot of times. There's something else neat. I'll show you about that in a second. But the next part is the App Store, this is probably the coolest part. So the App Store is not really a store in that you don't have to pay money for apps. Maybe there'll be versions of that later, but it's just the idea that you could clone stuff and push it to Staccato, but wouldn't it be neat if there was just a place of all the stuff that's ready to run already, and you just could start running these apps? And we made that happen with this App Store. So here's some Perl, Python, PHP, Node.js apps, and I can click install Bugzilla with one click from here. Maybe I'll do this currency converter. So I install the app. It's probably already got one, so I'll say currency yapsy. Now this is actually doing the same REST API that the push would have done, except it's actually just all of those apps that you saw are actually GitHub repos, and it's just pulling for that part of the thing. It just pulls the repo and zips it up, and sends it to the Staccato, which is expecting the zip file, and all the rest just happens. So I'm starting this up. I'll show you some other apps that are started while this one's spinning up. So part of the start process is creating a Lxe container for this thing to run in. And, oops. Oh, I am unauthorized. I think the default for this app is Staccato. So this is cool. This is kind of like a terminal emulator into the VM. So you could actually, and the cool thing about this is oh man, I'm running Penadactyl. Does anybody run that? It's very bad to do during a talk. It's a Vim-based browser, but sometimes you hit a key and you expect it to do something, and it just deletes your screen. So I was going to turn that off, but then I was like, why not be brave? Okay. So this currency converter, I'll just show that now, is it's just a Python app that that shows that $1 Canadian, because Active State's a Canadian company, is equal to 1,539 Tanzanian shillings. Okay. So the best part about the store is that you can make your own stores. In fact, why don't we do that? Because it's so easy. Okay, so when I was over here in the App Store and we just installed this currency app, this thing is really just a pointer to GitHub, and this brings up the actual GitHub README, and you can go to the top, clone the URL, CD into it, and Staccato push it, make some changes to it. If you didn't like the way it worked from the App Store, you could just grab the source and tweak it and run it, because you're programmers. That's what you do. So if you're an admin, you get this settings thing. You can create regular users and admin users. And generally, if you're running your own Staccato, you're going to be the admin user, so you'll see all this. But like if I was going to create an account for you guys in the sandbox, I couldn't make you admins, because then you could delete all the users. And, and I know you wouldn't do it on purpose. But anyway, if I look at the store URLs, these are all just JSON files. And about the only cool thing I've seen in Penadactyl is if I do this and open a new tab, I can just hit P. Yes, can it work? People can't read that, can they? Let me. Okay. So it's just a JSON file that has a bunch of meta information about these various apps, which GitHub repos they come from, and which services they're going to need, that kind of thing. And this is all that's needed to create a store. So if I were to take if I were to copy all that text and go to a no-paste site, like, say, Gist, people use Gists, some people call them Gists on GitHub. It's just a no-paste site. But it has one cool feature. I'm going to, oops. I thought I had hit my paste buffer. There we go. And let's just take, I've got to be careful when doing this, but oops, I probably did it wrong, didn't I? This is not a good live demo to do, I'm sorry, but we're brave. The Python Lxe framework. We'll just make a little change there. I create this public Gist, and then I take the raw view of that. That's going to give me a URL. Is that valid JSON? It looks like it. No, it's not. Luckily, Jan's just shaking his head, I know. Don't worry, man. It'll be okay. I can edit this somehow. This needs to be a square bracket, I believe. Does that look good now? Anybody? Those in the front who can actually read it? What could possibly go wrong? Okay. So yank, I believe, is the thing. And now, if I were to go over here and add this URL, okay, I've added that. And if I did break it, we can just undo it by deleting it. But let's see. It was the currency thing. Okay. And so now I go back to the store, and I go to my app store, and we see two currency converters, one which has the Lxe framework. So we made a new store effectively, and these could be pointing at different repos. But I just want to show you. And actually, what we did is we did it on this on the Lxe sandbox. So now anybody using that sandbox could see that. And if we actually make changes to the real store, then any Staccato that's running its default store JSONs would see those instantly. So it's pretty cool. We can keep, at ActiveSay, we keep adding daily new apps to the store. I'm going to go and delete that before I get fired. So, yeah, I'll just delete that. And I'm done. We go back to the App Store, and it's gone. Yep, just one. Okay. So I've talked a bit about the security, the Lxe containers. I've talked about almost all of this, but what I didn't show was actually SSHing into. So now if I go back here and I say S apps, I have this currency Lxe. Check this out. I can Staccato SSH. So this is a wrapper around SSH, and it's a real SSH, but it just, when you logged in, it silently sent you a private key for a private public key pair that it had generated and inserted into all of your applications such that you can SSH into these applications while they're running without a password, which is cool. So let's take one of the apps that we just did, currency Lxe. Actually has to do a little SSH shenanigans, but to make it work. But so now we're in there. If we ls this, this is the actual stuff that got pushed over, and you could actually go in and see it, make changes. If you wanted to look at the logs, we could look at the staging log, for instance. So this is the stuff that we saw going by when we were installing it, etc. The cool thing is to show this is really a container. That's all the processes that container sees. Now, I think this is a good time to talk about the coolest thing that I've been doing in the last month, and that I actually did with a couple of Lxe people yesterday. Think about this, and I've done it with Raffle, right? We did it while you were in Germany. I just found him on IRC, and I said, hey, let's do this pair up thing. So I made this app called Pair Up. It doesn't do anything, but when you install it as a Staccato app, I mean, it literally uses Netcat. Each app has to have something that it serves currently, and I think in the next release it doesn't even need to have that. We just use a Netcat command to make it look like there's a server there. But now I have a container that I can SSH into. But I installed this under a Staccato group, and I added Raffle to the group. And so now he can also SSH in there. And then we go in there and we both run tmux, and we're in the shared editing environment. And then if you take it a step further and install all of your favorite Perl modules ahead of time, then basically you have in all of your dot configuration files that you prefer, then you have just a beautiful environment for pair programming on something and having no cause of danger. You have a server to work on, and if you accidentally rm-fr/, you can sudo install anything, and you could sudo delete the whole thing, but you'd only be deleting one instance of a Staccato app. So it's pretty cool. And I've just been finding when people report bugs on IRC now, I say, hey, let's pair on it right now. And somebody did this yesterday. They found a pquery bug. They're like, Ingy. They're on #Lxe actually, and I just found a bug in your thing that I caused when I released something of my own that you happen to use. And I'm like, well, let's fix it right now. And we did. And we got it released to CPAN in about 15 minutes. That included me showing him all of Staccato and that kind of thing. Oh, that reminds me of one thing. To do the S thing, you need a Staccato client. Every microcloud or the sandbox has a client page that you can go to and download it for. It will detect which operating system you're on for these four, and you download a client. So that's really cool. And it also comes with a full documentation. And ActiveState, one of the things they do best is document stuff. And so you can actually, you can just search for Staccato documentation and find it on the ActiveState site, but it's built right into the VM that you're using, so it's really, really handy. I was going to show you a couple apps, and I kind of talked about this pair-up thing, but let's go to the conclusion and maybe take a few questions since we're running out of time. Randall, you have a question? I am, in fact. That's a great question, and I'll repeat the question. So Randall Schwartz just asked, am I aware of OpenShift from Red Hat, which is, you're right, that's, I should have mentioned that in my other passes. I just forgot when I wrote it. Yeah, interestingly, I'm good friends with this guy in Seattle named Mark Atwood, and I was the developer evangelist for Staccato, and he's the developer evangelist for OpenShift. And we compare notes all the time. And what I'm really interested in, so yes, I'm very aware of it, and we compare features, and I do this quite openly with them because I figure all of this stuff is at such an early stage that it's best to play along. Nobody's going to lose market share or anything at this point. We have to come up with good abstractions. I can say there's some things I like about OpenShift, but I think there's a lot more that Mark likes about Staccato currently. In fact, he told me yesterday that at his company meetings, they use Staccato as the baseline of what they should be doing next for OpenShift. It's not a multi-user system, as I know. It doesn't have, I think it does have containership, but they forgot to open source it when they did their big open source release because our 15-year-old, now 16-year-old, Daniel, he's like, it's not in there. And he's like, I'm like, well, I'm sitting right next to the Red Hat guys. They say it's in there. And they're like, oh, we forgot to open source it. Anyway, they're going to be a big player, and One of the things that I've worked on my own is a GitHub organization called Cloud Apps. And that's, we have one called Staccato Apps, and that's where all the apps that were in the store live. And I fork those into something called Cloud Apps and I've actually gone up to every company, POS company that I could find, tried to find somebody who was actually an open source hacker and interested in this and saying, hey, let's make all of these work on all these POSes. And if we do that, like Heroku's like, we don't need to do that, we're the big guys, which is true. But if they don't do it, then they're the only POS that doesn't have 1,000 apps working in this, you know what I mean? So just by playing along, you get it. But what I'm hoping is that we look at what did it take? Because with Staccato, basically, if you have a web app, all you have to do is listen on a port that Staccato tells you to listen on that puts in an environment variable and a couple other config tweaks. Sometimes it's harder than that. Usually it's pretty easy to get something working on Staccato. And you can, one thing about OpenShift, sorry I'm kind of going off here, but one thing about OpenShift that Mark saw that I think is just almost a deal killer for OpenShift is that it requires you to have your app in their directory structure. So you can't take something existing and easily turn it into something that works on OpenShift. You have to restructure the whole thing. And I think when they started, they just go, well, this is going to be something that people just start from scratch and develop. ActiveState said, well, this is something that people's going to want to move their current stuff over to. But yeah, I would like to see, if you're an app developer and there's 12 major POSes and you want to have your app work on all of them, you should only have to do one thing. And it should just be, you should provide the metadata and let all the POSes react to that. And I think by actually just starting this Cloud Apps effort, I can get some traction and people can see, oh yeah, it's just actually the same metadata in 15 different forms. You know, why don't we just decide on one and be done with it? Because this is going to, I mean, as a web developer, you're going to get a huge audience by supporting POS. But if you have to do it 15 different ways for 15 different companies or players, then you're not going to do it. So anyway, does that answer your question, Randall? Sorry. I think I can take some more questions. And I do want to invite you. So my conclusion is that Staccato is a future, or something like Staccato will be the future, I think. That's where my head's at right now. Staccato is ready to play with now, so you can start, welcome to the future. And I will probably find anybody that's interested in using this pair-up type of thing with me. I actually use it to get inside of a container and then use the Staccato client from within a container to make new containers. It's really, it's mind-bendingly recursive. Maybe it doesn't sound like it, but I will blow your mind. And so Jan and I at 1:30 on Friday are going to give a 2-hour workshop, and we'll play with all this stuff, convert some apps over, get you all running, get you microcloud if you want that, or create an account for you on the Sandbox, and it'll be pretty cool. I can take a couple more questions. Yes?
You're talking about multiple platforms as a service. Do you have any comparisons anywhere for like the pricing and support structures compared to like .cloud or Heroku or any of the other things out there?
That's something I'm not the best person to ask. So, but Jan and I can get you the right person to talk to. Yeah. The question was, sorry, I said I was good, but I'm not. Anyway, the question was, is there a comparison of pricing between all of the different POSes? And I'm just not a pricing guy, so I don't know. But another question? Anything? Who thinks that this stuff is somewhat interesting? Anybody? No? All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoy the future, and I'll see you there.